He pulled the last page out of the folder, and instead of the contract, there was a green dinosaur covered in purple spots. That was all it took for him to explode in front of every partner in the room. "You're fired." "This is unacceptable." She took her daughter's hand, swallowed her tears, and walked out. But what he didn't know was that the little girl's mistake had just saved everything he owned. Nathaniel Cole was 39 years old, and he had built a fortune that few men on the East Coast could rival. He owned Cole Industries, a real estate and investment firm his father had started in a single rented office, and which Nathaniel had since turned into an empire, with development stretching from Connecticut to the Carolinas. But if you asked anyone who worked for him what it was like, the answer was always the same: cold, distant, impossible to please. He had dark hair that he kept cropped close, with the first threads of grey showing at his temples, and eyes the colour of wet slate that rarely softened, no matter who stood in front of him. He had been living like this for 3 years, locked away in a sprawling stone house on the edge of Crestmont, Connecticut, one of those towns where hedges are trimmed into perfect rectangles and nobody asks their neighbours too many questions. The house had once belonged to his wife, Catherine, who had decorated every room herself before she died in a car accident 3 years earlier, 5 months pregnant, while he was behind the wheel. He had never spoken about it to anyone, not to his business partners, not to his old college friends, not even to the therapist he had visited exactly twice before deciding that work was the only treatment he needed. Since then, he had turned himself into a machine. He woke at 5 every morning. He arrived at the office before anyone else and left, after the last light in the building went dark. He took no vacations and accepted no invitations, and whenever someone tried to get too close, he raised a wall of ice so high that most people simply stopped trying. The only person allowed inside his house every single day was Olivia Bennett, his housekeeper for the past 2 years. She was 31. With light brown hair she usually kept twisted into a loose knot, and hazel eyes that had learned, a long time ago, how to look tired and steady at the same time. She had a 5-year-old daughter named Lily, a girl with a tangle of blonde curls and bright green eyes, whom she was raising entirely on her own. Lily's father had vanished the moment he found out Olivia was pregnant. Olivia had no parents nearby, no siblings in town, no one in the world besides herself and the little girl who was, quite literally, her entire life. Then June arrived, and with June came summer break. That morning, Olivia had been rehearsing the sentence in her head since she woke up. She rehearsed it again while changing into her uniform. She rehearsed it one last time, standing outside the study door, not yet brave enough to knock. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to ask you for a favor, just for this summer. Lily's school let out for break and I don't have anyone to leave her with during the day. I don't have family here, and my paycheck doesn't stretch far enough for a summer camp. I'm asking, as respectfully as I can, if I might bring her to work with me. She's a quiet girl, she won't bother anyone." Nathaniel studied her for several long seconds, the way he might study a particularly weak business proposal. "Listen, Olivia, I didn't hire a nanny. I hired someone to keep this house in order. If you can't manage that, there are 15 people in this town who'd take your place by tomorrow morning." "I understand, sir. I promise my work won't suffer at all. You have until the end of August. And hear me clearly, that child does not come near my study. She touches nothing. She makes no noise. If I hear a single complaint, if I find a single thing out of place, you're both gone the same day. Understood?" "Completely understood, sir." "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me. This isn't a favor. It's an exception that won't happen again." That night, after putting Lily to bed, Olivia ran the numbers over and over in her head. If she let pride or fear talk her out of this, how long would it take to find another job that paid the same? She called 2 different summer programs just to confirm what she already suspected. Neither one fit her budget. She even thought for one terrible moment about leaving Lily alone in the apartment with the door locked tight. The thought made her stomach turn. That wasn't who she was. She decided she would keep bringing her daughter along, even if it meant risking every single day that Mr. Cole would change his mind. For the first week, everything went exactly as Nathaniel had demanded. Lily spent her hours tucked into a corner of the kitchen, drawing or playing quietly with a pair of cloth dolls. Olivia kept one eye on her daughter and one eye on her work, tense all day, waiting for the moment something would go wrong. But children, as anyone knows, rarely stay where you leave them. The second Monday, Olivia woke with a start to the sound of laughter drifting down from the second floor. She ran up the stairs, her heart climbing into her throat, and froze in the doorway of the master bedroom. There was Lily, bouncing on Nathaniel Cole's bed, laughing in loud, breathless bursts, While he sat at the edge with his laptop balanced on his knees, watching her with an expression Olivia had never seen on his face before. It wasn't anger. It was a kind of deep, almost painful confusion. "Lily!" Olivia gasped, scooping her up. "I'm so sorry, sir. I don't know how she got in here. I swear I was just in the kitchen with—" "I wanted to wake you up," Lily said, completely unbothered. "My mum says you get up really early and you look tired, so I thought if I played with you, you'd feel happy." "It's fine," he said flatly, not looking at either of them. "Take her down for breakfast." That night, Olivia couldn't sleep, replaying every second of the scene. What she couldn't have known was that Nathaniel lay awake long after the lights in the house went dark, staring at the ceiling, remembering the sound of a child's laughter in his bed. A sound that, without him being able to explain why, had stirred something he had spent 3 years trying to bury. Over the following days, Lily started showing up near the study more and more often. At first, she only lingered in the doorway. Then she began sitting on the floor with a box of crayons. Slowly, without anyone planning it, the little girl became part of the daily scenery of that house. One morning, Nathaniel came down for breakfast and found her sitting in his usual spot at the table, a plate of pancakes in front of her, carefully cutting them into shapes before eating each piece. "That's my chair," he said, stopping in the doorway. "I know," Lily answered, not looking up, "but my mum says you eat too fast and you don't even enjoy it. I'm teaching you how it's done." Nathaniel stood there for a moment, unsure how to respond. Instead of demanding his seat back, he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, and for the first time in 3 years, someone in that kitchen heard him laugh. It wasn't loud. It was barely more than a short huff of breath, but Olivia, walking in at that exact moment with the coffee pot, stopped dead in her tracks, something tightening in her chest that was equal parts relief and fear, because what she feared most wasn't that Lily would bother Mr. Cole. It was that she would start to love him, and that he, at some point, would simply grow tired of the game. The weeks that followed settled into a strange, almost secret rhythm none of the 3 of them dared name out loud. In the mornings, Lily no longer needed to wake him, because Nathaniel had started coming downstairs earlier, almost as if he were hoping to find her in the kitchen. In the afternoons, while Olivia finished her chores, the girl sat on the floor of the study, and he, between phone calls, asked her questions about her drawings without anyone prompting him to. One morning, Olivia stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen. It was already 7:20 and Lily was still asleep. Nathaniel himself came down the stairs, dressed for the day, and peeked into the girl's room with a gentleness Olivia had never once seen him show toward anything. "She's still sleeping," he whispered as though sharing a secret. "She stayed up late last night finishing a drawing. I think we should let her rest a little longer." Olivia stared at him, stunned. This was the same man who, 2 months earlier, had warned her that his study was off-limits to her child, now lowering his voice so he wouldn't wake her. One Thursday, searching for a document on his desk, Nathaniel found a small handmade bracelet made of looped rubber bands, tucked beneath a folded note in clumsy handwriting. "For you, so you remember, I'm your friend." He remembered then that Lily had spent the previous afternoon weaving bracelets at the kitchen table, insisting that everyone in the house needed one. That night, for the first time since Catherine's death, Nathaniel cried, alone in his study, with a child's bracelet looped around his fingers. It wasn't grief alone, it was the sound of a man realizing that his heart, the organ he had been so certain he'd turned to stone, could still feel something after all. He sat there on the floor of his own study for nearly an hour, with no one in the house aware that the coldest man in Crestmont was crying over a rubber band bracelet. That same night, he allowed himself to think about something he had never let himself think before. If Catherine's pregnancy had gone to term, his son or daughter would be nearly 3 years old by now, not 5 like Lily, but every time he heard her laugh that openly, that freely, something tightened in his chest with a mixture of grief and gratitude he couldn't quite name. As though a part of him, the part that had decided he no longer had the right to feel any tenderness toward a child, was receiving, undeserved, a second chance disguised as a little girl who wasn't even his. That kind of peace never lasts long before something threatens it. One afternoon, while Olivia was ironing in the laundry room, she overheard 2 of the part-time household staff talking just outside the door, unaware she could hear them. "Since when does Mr. Cole let the housekeeper bring her kid to work? I've worked here 5 years and I've never seen him this distracted. That woman knows exactly what she's doing. She's working him. I'm telling you, by Christmas she'll have a ring on her finger and we'll all be calling her Mrs. Cole." Olivia felt her face burn with shame and anger. She decided right then to put some distance between Lily and the study. But children don't understand strategic distance, and the girl, without her mother knowing, kept seeking out the man who, without quite realizing it, had already started seeking out her company too. "Is something wrong, Mr. Nathaniel?" she asked him one afternoon, noticing he looked more serious than usual. "I have a very important meeting tomorrow here at the house. I'm going to sign some big papers with some partners. Can I help?" "No, sweetheart. This is grown-up business." Neither of them imagined yet that those big papers were about to become the center of the worst crisis Cole Industries had faced in years. Nathaniel's senior business partner was a man named Richard Hale. He had been tied to the Cole family for 15 years, since Nathaniel's father had still run the company. On the surface, Richard had everything figured out: a large house, 2 kids in private school, a lifestyle that radiated stability. Almost no one knew that he had spent the last year drowning in debt from a string of failed real estate ventures, that he had taken out loans against the company's name without full authorization, certain he could fix everything before anyone noticed. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a desperate man who had slid step by step, justification after justification, into doing exactly what he'd once sworn he never would. The contract Nathaniel was scheduled to sign that morning wasn't a simple partnership renewal. It was a mechanism designed to shift majority control of certain financial decisions into a new corporate structure, one that would let Richard use Cole Industries' core assets as collateral for his own crushing debts, without Nathaniel realizing it until it was far too late. Nathaniel had decided to close the deal in the privacy of his own home, away from the corporate offices, to keep the news from reaching the financial press too soon. That morning, while he waited for his partners to arrive, he reviewed the documents one last time and left them, neatly arranged inside a leather folder on his desk. What he didn't know was that Lily, looking for a blank sheet of paper to finish a drawing, had wandered into the study while her mother cleaned the upstairs bathroom. She found no loose paper anywhere. All she saw sitting on the desk was a folder full of white pages. To her it was simply paper. She pulled out the last sheet, the one with the most empty space in the margins, and sat on the floor to draw her dinosaur with all the care of someone creating a masterpiece. Then, with the same innocence, she slid it back exactly where she'd found it. At 11 that morning, in the home library that had been turned into an improvised boardroom, Nathaniel sat down across from Richard Hale and 2 attorneys. He opened the folder, picked up his pen, and flipped through the pages until he reached the last one, where he was supposed to sign. He stopped. Instead of the legal text, there was a dinosaur, green, covered in purple spots, and in the corner, written in careful, crooked letters, "For Mr. Nathaniel Love, Lily." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. "What is this?" one of the junior partners asked, leaning in for a closer look. Nathaniel felt the blood rush to his face, not from tenderness, from fury, from humiliation in front of the very people deciding whether they could still trust him as a businessman. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, standing abruptly. He stormed out of the library and into the living room, where he found Olivia folding a tablecloth over the arm of the couch. "Can you explain this?" he said, throwing the crumpled page onto the table. "Sir, I had no idea, I swear. That was a legal contract, Olivia. I was supposed to sign it 15 minutes ago in front of my partners, in front of the people deciding whether they can still trust me as a businessman. Please, sir, let me explain. She didn't know. I don't care what she did or didn't know. This is exactly what I warned you about from the start. And you assured me that nothing like this would happen. Mr. Cole, please, it was an accident. A 5-year-old child doesn't... You're fired." The words landed like a bucket of ice water. "Sir, please, I need this job. My daughter needs... You have until the end of the day to gather your things." "Sir, I'm begging you, please." "There's nothing more to discuss, Olivia." Lily, who had been listening from the doorway, her eyes brimming with tears, took a step forward, her voice small but steady, cut through the silence. "I'm sorry, sir, but watch out for those men. They're not good people." And without another word, she took her mother's hand and the 2 of them walked out of the house. Nathaniel stood there, breathing hard, his heart pounding in a way he didn't recognize. The fury was still there, hot, justified in his mind. But underneath it, something else was beginning to stir, uncomfortably, something that felt less like anger and more like shame. What had she meant by these men? He walked back into the library with his jaw clenched, determined to put the whole matter to rest. But Lily's words kept echoing in his head, a strange refrain that refused to quiet down. "Here's another copy. No drawings this time. Richard said, sliding it toward him. "We can wrap this up in 5 minutes." Nathaniel picked up the pen. He held it over the signature line and stopped again. "I need to postpone this. Let's reschedule for next week." "Nathaniel, we've gone over this for weeks. The investors are waiting on confirmation." "I said next week, Richard. I don't understand why this is suddenly a problem. And now I want to look at it again. Is there a problem with that?" Something, a flicker, just a shadow, crossed Richard's face. Barely a moment. But Nathaniel, who had spent years reading micro-expressions across negotiating tables, caught it. "No problem at all," Richard said finally, gathering his papers with more force than necessary. "Next week, then." That same night in his own home, Richard sat alone in his study, staring at a text from a contact saved only under the initials RK, the lender who had fronted him the money for his failed investments, now demanding full payment by the end of the month. From the living room, he could hear his kids arguing over the television. None of them had any idea how close they were to losing everything. Richard didn't think of himself, not for a single moment, as a thief. He told himself he was simply rearranging resources that would, one way or another, find their way back. He'd worked alongside the Cole family for 15 years. He'd stood at Catherine's funeral. And yet, here he was, about to risk it all. That didn't make him any less guilty, but it made him, in some strange way, deeply human. Nathaniel didn't go straight home that night. He asked David Mercer, his most trusted assistant, to dig through every clause of that contract, every name, every legal structure buried in the fine print. What David found 2 days later left him cold. The document would have let Richard use the company's core assets as collateral for his own severely overdue debts. Within 6 months, the bank could have laid claim to everything Nathaniel's father had spent a lifetime building, brick by brick, deal by deal. He would have lost everything over a 5-minute signature on an ordinary morning. "You haven't slept in 2 days, boss," David said, finding him alone in the dark of his office. "And it's not just about Richard, is it? It's about Olivia." Nathaniel said nothing, which, for someone who knew him this well, was answer enough. "I've worked for you 10 years, and I've never seen you this alive as you've been the past few months, since that little girl started showing up around the office. Go fix it. You're not the type to sit around and sulk." He had fired the only person, besides his late wife, who had managed to make him smile in 3 years, and he had done it because of something that, in reality, had just saved him. The next morning, Nathaniel knocked on Olivia's door himself. No driver, no assistant, dressed far more simply than usual. "I came to apologize. I reacted in a way that wasn't right. Lily is 5 years old. She made an innocent mistake, with no malice behind it at all, and I treated it like a deliberate betrayal. I want you to come back to work." "No, sir, I'm not coming back. I don't have a husband. I don't have anyone to help me with her. It's just Lily and me against the world, and my job is to protect her from things like this. I don't want my daughter bothering you anymore. She never bothered me. It was the opposite. That little girl gave me reasons to smile again. I miss her, Olivia. I miss both of you. The house feels empty again, the way it did before you came." Olivia studied him for a long moment, trying to make sense of something she couldn't quite name. "Give me a day to think about it, sir." That same evening, while Olivia made dinner, Lily sat at the table with her arms crossed, refusing to touch her plate. "I miss Mr. Nathaniel. Why did he get so mad about a drawing? I just wanted him to have something pretty to look at during his meeting." "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart, even when it doesn't mean they stop loving people. Do you think he still loves me even though he's mad?" Olivia didn't know how to answer, because she was asking herself the exact same question. That night, replaying the past 2 years in her mind, Olivia thought about Nathaniel's constant coldness, the way he avoided meeting her eyes. And she thought too about the last few weeks. The brief laugh in the kitchen, the rubber band bracelet, the way he'd started coming downstairs earlier just to catch breakfast with a little girl who wasn't even his. She decided to go back, not just for the money, although that mattered plenty, but because somewhere underneath it all, something in her had shifted too. The months that followed unfolded in a way none of the 3 of them could have predicted. The old strict rules dissolved quietly, without anyone announcing it, and something new, slow, almost invisible, began growing between Nathaniel and Olivia. One evening, while they waited for Lily to finish her bath, Olivia found the courage to ask something she'd wondered about for months. "What happened with your wife, Nathaniel? If you don't mind my asking. We were in an accident 3 years ago. I was driving. Catherine was 5 months pregnant. A truck ran a red light and there was nothing I could do. She died that same night. The baby never made it. I've spent 3 years blaming myself, thinking if I'd driven a little slower, taken a different street, she'd still be here. I still hear it sometimes. Late at night. I've never told anyone that before. It wasn't your fault, Nathaniel. That's what everyone says. Because it's true. What about you? What happened with Lily's father? He left the moment he found out I was pregnant. Didn't say a word. I remember that night at the hospital like it was yesterday. The contractions started before dawn and I had no one to call. I took a cab by myself, telling myself the whole ride that we'd both be fine. When Lily was born and the nurse placed her on my chest, all I could think was, I'm not alone anymore. This girl and me against the whole world. I learned to live with it. Lily is the one good thing that came out of all of it, and I wouldn't trade her for anything. That night, 2 people marked by abandonment in completely different ways found in each other something neither one expected. Real understanding. Not pity. Understanding. From that moment on, their conversations grew longer. Their glances lingered a second too long. Nathaniel started inventing small excuses to come home earlier. A week later, Nathaniel invited her to a charity gala hosted by his business circle, the kind of event he usually attended alone out of pure obligation. Olivia accepted, nervous, wondering if she could possibly avoid feeling out of place among women wearing jewelry worth more than her entire apartment. The moment they walked into the ballroom, she felt the stares, some curious, some openly unkind. One woman, the wife of one of his partners, approached with a smile that never reached her eyes. "And you are Mr. Cole's new assistant." "I'm Olivia," she answered, her voice steady. "I'm his partner." "How interesting," the woman said, drifting toward another group with a barely concealed laugh. Olivia walked toward the terrace, fighting back tears of humiliation. Nathaniel found her there a few minutes later. "I don't belong in this world, Nathaniel. These people are never going to see me as their equal. These people don't have half the strength you've shown raising a daughter on your own. I don't care what they think. I care what you feel." Olivia didn't leave that night. She walked back into the ballroom with her head held high, determined not to give that woman or anyone else the satisfaction of watching her run. But not everything stayed simple. One night, Olivia overheard Nathaniel on the phone with one of his oldest partners, a man named Robert Stanton, telling him to think carefully about how it would look for him, Nathaniel Cole, to be with the woman who cleans his house. For days, Olivia kept her distance, until he, confused, finally asked what he had done wrong. "I heard your call with Mr. Stanton. He's right, Nathaniel. I clean your house. I come from a completely different world than yours. I don't want you to have to choose between your world and this. I don't care what Robert Stanton thinks. I spent 3 years of my life feeling absolutely nothing. You and your daughter were the first people in all that time to make me feel alive again. I've fallen in love with you, Olivia." "Me too, Nathaniel. I've spent weeks trying to convince myself it wasn't true." There were no movie-perfect kisses that night, just a long, quiet embrace between 2 people finally allowing themselves to feel something after years of guarding against the pain. From that night on, neither of them pretended anymore, in front of the other, that what they had was just affection between an employer and his housekeeper. Olivia still cleaned the house in the mornings, but she stopped leaving the moment her shift ended. She stayed for dinner. She stayed up talking late into the night after Lily had gone to sleep, and Nathaniel, who had spent 3 years measuring every minute of his day in meetings and financial reports, realized that the most valuable minutes of his entire week were these, sitting in his own kitchen, listening to a woman who wanted nothing from him but his honest attention. Not everyone in Nathaniel's life welcomed the news with the same warmth. 2 weeks later, Margaret Whitmore, Catherine's mother, arrived unannounced and found Lily playing in the living room. "Who are they, Nathaniel?" "Olivia's worked here a while now, and her daughter, they've both become very important to me." "It's only been 3 years, Nathaniel." "Barely 3 years, and there's already a new woman living in the house Catherine decorated with her own hands. I'm not replacing Catherine, Margaret. No one could ever do that. But I've spent 3 years walking around like a ghost, and this is the first time I've felt like a living person again." Margaret stood there, torn between the grief she still carried and something else, something that looked uncomfortably like understanding. "It isn't fair that you get to move forward while I still miss her every single day," she said finally, her voice cracking. "But it wouldn't be fair to ask you to stay frozen forever either. Give me time, Nathaniel. I'm not asking you to stop being happy. Just give me time to get used to the idea." The following months were perhaps the happiest any of the 3 had felt in years. One night, as Nathaniel tucked her into bed, Lily looked up at him with those wide eyes that seemed to see further than any grown-up could explain in words. "Can I call you Dad? My mom says a dad is someone who takes care of you and loves you a lot, and you take care of me, don't you? More than you know. Then I'm calling you Dad." That night, after the girl had fallen asleep, Nathaniel sat on the edge of her bed watching her breathe, feeling a mixture of happiness and something close to fear. The fear of someone who, after losing something deeply loved, discovers he has something to lose all over again. That same week, Olivia found, while straightening the medicine cabinet, a bottle of painkillers far emptier than it should have been for someone who claimed to have the occasional headache. She asked him about it almost in passing. "It's quarter end. Too many numbers, too many meetings, nothing to worry about." She believed him. She had no reason yet not to. That fear, unfortunately, wouldn't stay vague for long. It started with constant headaches, which Nathaniel tried to ignore for weeks, blaming them on quarterly reports and late nights. Then came the weight loss, subtle at first, until one day Olivia, adjusting the belt on a pair of pants that had suddenly gone loose on him, insisted, nearly in tears, that he see a doctor. "Do it for me. Do it for Lily." The tests took 3 full weeks, during which Nathaniel tried to act normal around Lily, while inside a cold shadow began spreading over every moment of happiness he had worked so hard to build. The doctor met him with a carefully professional expression that didn't quite hide the weight of what he was about to say. The scans had found a tumor. It was serious, but still treatable. He would need surgery, followed by months of treatment. "How serious is it, doctor?" Nathaniel asked with a calm he didn't actually feel. "It's serious, Mr. Cole. I won't lie to you. But catching it at this stage gives us a real advantage. What I need from you is to not face this alone. You need support beside you through all of this." Nathaniel thought immediately of Olivia and Lily, and he thought too of the possibility of saying nothing at all, of carrying it in silence, the same way he'd carried Catherine's death for 3 years. Nathaniel walked out of that office feeling like the whole world had gone strangely quiet. He didn't tell Olivia that night, or the next. He spent nearly a week carrying the secret alone, wrestling with the same question. What right did he have to ask Olivia to carry this too, after everything she had already survived on her own? Without saying why, he started pulling away again. "What's going on, Nathaniel? You've turned back into the man I met a year ago, cold, distant. I think it's best if we put some distance between us, Olivia." "Don't you dare do this, Nathaniel Cole. Don't shut down on me again. Don't pretend this is the right thing to do without telling me what's actually happening. I already lost one man to cowardice. I won't lose another one to it. I have cancer, Olivia." The silence that followed was absolute. "I have a tumor. They found it a week ago. I don't know what's going to happen, and I couldn't ask you to carry that. Not after everything you've already lived through alone." Olivia stood, walked toward him, and took his face in her hands. "Listen to me, Nathaniel. I am not Catherine, and this isn't an accident no one could control. This is something we're going to face together, do you hear me? I am not letting you face this alone. Not you, not me, not Lily." Nathaniel, the man who had faced down hostile boardrooms without flinching, broke down completely in that moment, crying in the arms of the woman who had become the most important person in his life. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Olivia arrived before dawn and sat in the waiting room of Crestmont Memorial Hospital, holding Lily's hand, the girl insisting on bringing along the stuffed dinosaur Nathaniel had given her months earlier, so it could give him strength. The operation lasted nearly 6 hours. 6 hours during which Olivia never once left that chair, silently repeating a prayer she hadn't said since she was a little girl herself. When the doctor finally came out to speak with her, his expression was different from the one he'd worn at their first meeting. Lighter. "The surgery went well. We removed the tumor entirely. Now comes recovery and preventive treatment, but everything looks very positive." Olivia felt the tears come this time, pure relief, finally allowed to fall without restraint. Olivia sat through every chemotherapy session, holding his hand no matter how many hours it took. Lily drew little cards covered in cheerful, crooked dinosaurs and messages like, "You got this, Dad," and "Love you so much," turning that cold treatment room into something that almost felt, strangely, like home. But not every day brought Lily strength. One afternoon, waiting outside the treatment room, she overheard 2 nurses talking quietly, saying some cases don't always turn out fine. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough to feel a fear she couldn't quite explain afterward. That night at home, she refused to sleep in her own room. Olivia found her sitting in the hallway, clutching the stuffed dinosaur, her eyes swollen from crying alone. "Is Dad going to die?" she asked, her voice so small it broke something inside Olivia. "Your dad is fighting really hard, Lily. The doctors are helping him, and we're helping him too, with all our love. I can't promise you life will never scare us, but I can promise you that no matter what happens, you will never be alone." The next day, once Nathaniel heard about that conversation, he asked to see her that same afternoon, still hooked up to an IV, and explained in simple words that her most important job was to keep loving him and keep drawing him dinosaurs, because that gave him the strength to keep fighting. "Do you promise?" "I promise you, Lily, with all my heart." Halfway through treatment, a routine scan came back worse than expected. The doctor explained more cautiously than before that some suspicious cells were still showing up and that they'd need to extend treatment by at least 2 more months with a more aggressive dose. Nathaniel took the news quietly, nodding along as though it were just another line item in a report, but Olivia could see something behind his eyes had gone hollow. That night was the first time Nathaniel, in silence, considered giving up. Olivia found him sitting on the edge of the bathtub, head in his hands, after vomiting for the 3rd time that night. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Olivia. I'm tired. Tired of the needles, the nausea, of not recognizing my own body in the mirror. Sometimes I think it would be easier on everyone if I just stopped fighting." "Don't you dare say that, Nathaniel Cole." She sat on the floor in front of him and took his hands, bruised from countless IV lines. "Remember what you promised, Lily. Then don't carry that promise alone. Let us help you carry it. We are not going anywhere, but neither are you. Do you understand me?" That night, Nathaniel found no easy answer, but he found at least the strength to finish that round of treatment without saying the word giving up again. Nearly 8 months of treatment passed before the day of the final results arrived. Nathaniel and Olivia sat together in front of the doctor, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles had gone white. "The most recent scans show no sign of cancer activity. You're officially in remission, Mr. Cole." The embrace that followed was so fierce, so loaded with months of fear finally released, that neither of them could hold back their tears in front of the doctor himself. That night back home, with Lily already asleep after celebrating with a chocolate cake she'd insisted on decorating herself, Nathaniel took Olivia out to the back garden, the same garden where he hadn't set foot since Catherine's funeral, and pulled a small box from his pocket, one he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "I spent the last 3 years of my life convinced I didn't deserve to be happy anymore, that I'd used up my entire share of love with Catherine, and all that was left for me was to work until my body finally gave out. And then a 5-year-old girl jumped on my bed one morning, and everything I believed started falling apart. You and Lily gave me back something I thought I'd lost for good. You taught me that love doesn't run out, Olivia. It just sometimes needs to find a new place to live." He opened the small box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. Nothing close to the kind of extravagance anyone would expect from a man with his fortune. "Will you marry me? Will you let us build, the 3 of us, the family we both thought we no longer deserved?" "Yes, yes, I will, Nathaniel, more than I ever thought I could want anything again." A few days later, while flipping through bridal magazines, an old worry came back to nag at Olivia. "I'm scared of losing myself in all of this, Nathaniel. My whole life I've worked for everything I have, little as it's been. I don't want to become someone who only shows up in photographs. I saw how they looked at me at that party. Who said you have to stop being yourself? You can keep working if that's what you want. You can study whatever you always wanted to and never could, for lack of time or money. The only thing I don't want is for you to think marrying me means disappearing. I want exactly the woman I fell in love with, the one who raised a daughter alone and never once asked anyone for permission. Not some edited version meant to fit into a ballroom." That conversation, more than any ring, was what finally convinced Olivia that this marriage could be built on real respect, not just good intentions. The wedding took place 6 months later, in the same garden where Nathaniel had proposed. Only a handful of guests filled the white chairs set among the trees. There was no orchestra, none of the spectacle anyone would expect from the wedding of one of Connecticut's most well-known businessmen. Nathaniel had insisted it stay simple, real. When Olivia walked toward him in a simple dress she'd chosen herself, her light brown hair loose around her shoulders, instead of pinned back the way it always was for work, Nathaniel felt his legs shake in a way not even his toughest negotiations had ever managed to provoke. Lily, dressed in white, insisted on carrying the rings on a pillow decorated with dinosaurs, for good luck. During the ceremony, Nathaniel knelt down in front of her. "Lily, Today I'm not just marrying your mum. I also want to ask your permission to be your dad for real, officially on paper in every way that counts. Would you give me that honor?" The girl simply threw herself into his arms, and several of the guests, including Margaret, couldn't hold back their tears. Months later, the adoption paperwork would be finalized officially, though by then there had long been no doubt in anyone's heart about whose daughter she truly was. As for Richard Hale, the internal investigation eventually revealed the full truth about the fraudulent contract. He lost his stake in the company, though Nathaniel, understanding in his own way what it felt like to be trapped by one's own desperate choices, decided not to push for additional criminal charges. In time, even the staff member, whose comments had hurt Olivia so deeply in those early months, came to admit she'd been wrong to judge something she didn't understand, and Margaret, little by little, found her own place in this new family, never once stopping missing Catherine. Today, Nathaniel Cole remains one of the most respected businessmen in Connecticut, but the people who know him now no longer describe him as the cold, untouchable man he used to be. They talk about a man who comes down to breakfast with his wife and daughter every morning, who gets home before dark, who keeps a small rubber band bracelet in his desk drawer as a permanent reminder that sometimes the person who needs rescuing the most is the one you'd least expect. And it all started simply with a 5-year-old girl who refused to leave a man alone with his sadness. A girl who, without knowing it, wandered into a study looking for a blank piece of paper and walked out having found instead an entire family she never knew she was looking for. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear what you thought. Let us know on a scale from 0 to 10 what rating you'd give this story. Thank you for staying with us until the end.